All right, let's go over types of knowledge and Bloom's taxonomy. Let's see how they're connected. So, metacognitive knowledge is thinking about how you think. And that's an important concept because each one of these types of knowledge that we're going to talk about is a form of metacognition. The reason this is important for you is based on the course that you're in, based on the content of that course. What should you focus on first? If last week was learning style and how you learn best, what environmental stimulus do you focus on? This week is about the course. What type of knowledge is in that course? And that'll help you determine how to study for it, how to process that information, what to go to first to learn the content of that course so you can be efficient as a student and not waste a lot of time learning new and novel information. So metacognition, like I said before, is thinking about how you think. So each time you go in and you take a course, try to figure out what types of knowledge are important. So let's go through this process. If I'm in a history class, I'm going to focus on declarative knowledge, events, facts. Think of the game show Jeopardy! That's the most important knowledge to focus on. I don't want to go into process. I want to focus specifically on dates and events. Then just below that, you have conditional information. Think of traffic law. If you go down to a four-way stop, who goes first? Or if you're flying an airplane, when to do certain things. When do you call to the tower and get permission to land? When do these certain things happen? So anything dealing with laws or rules tends to be conditional. Conceptual knowledge, probably the most important type of knowledge for this class. It's really central to how this class was designed. I focus on the big picture items, the big theories that I know I was able to apply to my learning, that most students can apply to their own to try to make you efficient learners. Think of building a foundation to a house. We've got to start there first before we can build the rest of the structure, or it will be unstable. The same thing applies to your learning. Focus on the conceptual piece of learning. What are the foundational pieces of knowledge, and how are they interconnected? Think of chapters in a book. Those chapters often will define the largest concepts. Think of those first. It's the first thing I do. If I get a book that's related to a class that I'm in, I look at the chapters. I'll go to the table of contents, look at the chapters, and think to myself, how are these interconnected? How would I teach this information based on the conceptual information within it? I do that first before I ever get to the specifics of new information. Always focus on those big picture items before you get down into the weeds. Now, just below that is procedural. That's process. This does not just have to be hands-on kinesthetic learning. Yes, that's an important component to any skill, any task that you're going to do. What are the steps to do that skill? But think also of math. Think also of some sort of hands-on learning. Programming can be procedural. So anything where there's a process, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, any of that process-oriented order of operations type of information is important to focus on that first if you're in that type of class. So if you're in a math class, you want to make sure you have a good handle on order of operations. If you're in a hands-on skill-based course, you want to know the sequence of those skills that can be put into drills. How are those interconnected? How did the one skill set up the next into a drill? So those are the major areas. And if you're thinking about those, that's metacognition. You're thinking about thinking. Now you'll notice I broke this into explicit and implicit. I took long-term memory and I said, okay, There is an explicit component of long-term memory. There is an implicit, but I left one out. That was intentional, not by mistake. Notice right now we're just talking about procedural, but we're going to get to the behavioral component of learning. That's also considered implicit, but not right now. So I'm trying to keep it simple. Let's go to the next slide. Now we have that same diagram, but what I've done is I've taken the cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy and I took that pyramid and placed it above long-term memory, because that's really what we're talking about. Is Bloom's taxonomy is, what are we doing here with the types of knowledge and how do they get us to the upper levels of learning? Just think of this as levels of learning in relation to long-term memory or in relation to types of knowledge and how they get us to the upper levels of learning. So that explicit and implicit category of long-term memory, I took that same slide that was here before and I just plopped on the pyramid from Bloom's taxonomy. Let's look at Bloom's on the cognitive domain and then we'll get into the other two. So this course was designed, if you reflect back to the very first lecture, I said Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've got to make sure I meet the student's needs when I design a course. I do that right off the bat. I can't do anything about your physiological needs. I can do something about safety and security, making sure you feel safe in the course, that you're not getting bullied. We don't really have a problem with that at the college level, but if it happened, that would be my responsibility to make sure you felt safe to learn in that environment. Looking at your social needs, it's the whole reason I have you in groups, so y'all can work together, work on your social skills. That helps build self-esteem, especially if you're the person that's contributing a lot to the group. That can boost your self-esteem, and that helps you reach your full potential. That's Maslow's. But right next to it was Bloom's taxonomy. It's on the home page of the course. How do we use that in course design? Well, every time I create an assignment, I ask myself, where does that get the student? What levels of learning will this one assignment get them to? At the very beginning, I give you these quizzes. You can take them as many times as you want until you get the grade that you want. It's to help introduce the content in case you haven't watched the video before coming to class, so that at least you have some talking points. Like you and I can engage in a conversation because you will remember some of what you took the quiz on because you just took it before I did the lecture in class. We're talking about face-to-face class. It would have helped you develop an understanding. But quizzes, multiple choice tests, the reason I don't have a lot of those in this course, the reason I don't rely on those as the majority of the course, is they only get us to the lower levels of learning, remembering and understanding. I want to get you to application, analysis, evaluation, creation. Now let's look at the other assignments, the ones that make up the majority of the course. You have discussions, you have illustrations that you create that are linked to the activities. You have videos that are linked to the activities and the theoretical concepts. Those help ensure that you can apply what you know. Meaning, not only are you creating this illustration about it, but you have to put some thought into it. You have to show how the theoretical concept was linked to the activity. And you have to show that you have a good understanding of how to apply that to your own learning, or how it did apply to your learning. So you have to do some analysis and evaluation of all those previous assignments. And you had to create a lot of those on your own. So that tells me you can remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create something of your own from the content in this course. Essentially teaching it back to me. That is the higher levels of learning. I learned more in my first year of teaching than I did in 10 years of college. 2 years for an associate's, 2 years for a bachelor's, 2 years for a master's, and another 4 for a PhD. That was right on time. I didn't want you to think that it took me 10 years to get a bachelor's degree. So Let's think about this in terms of the capstone assignment for the course. We have a writing sample. The writing sample, not only do you have to remember and understand the content from the lectures and the quizzes, but you had to create the videos, you had to create the illustrations, you had to create the discussions about how the hands-on activity in the course was connected to the theoretical concept, each class period. So that means you had to analyze and evaluate that for correctness and create something of your own. All of those combined go into your writing sample. What that shows is if a university asks for a writing sample, when they evaluate it, not only have you been introduced to these educational theories, but it shows that you have used all of the levels of learning to create that document. That you can create something on your own that is a capstone course, and it shows a higher level of thought than just taking a multiple choice test. So that's why we have our final writing sample. It takes all of that and places it in one document. Every assignment that we've done in the course is connected to that one assignment at the end of the semester. Let's look at all the domains of Bloom's taxonomy. So Benjamin Bloom came up with this taxonomy, and he broke it out into 3 domains. You've got the cognitive domain, which we just talked about, and I linked to long-term memory. You have the affective domain. Remember that implicit side I just talked about? That's what we're talking about. The behavioral components. What impact does motivation have on your learning? What impact does behavior play when it comes to learning? That's the affective domain. That's that implicit side. Remember I said we have hands-on learning, that muscle memory, that procedural, that process that is implicit. Well, here is the other element of implicit learning, implicit knowledge, is the impact of behavior on learning, emotions, feelings. And then you have the psychomotor. That is the implicit side. That's the actions and doing. That's the hands-on learning. That's the whole reason we have the activities in the course, is to make sure we're covering all 3 of these domains. So not only am I getting you to the upper levels of learning, but these other 2 allow me to bring in all aspects of learning. So we're not leaving anything out. We're creating a well-rounded student. The skills allow you to have something hands-on. The psychomotor allows you to have something hands-on to apply the theoretical concept to. The affective domain brings in motivation. How does motivation affect your performance? How does motivation affect your behavior? That is the role of the affective domain. How do we internalize these concepts? We'll get to that in the second half of the semester. For right now, we're going to focus on the cognitive domain and how it's linked to types of knowledge. So here's a matrices that another organization created, and they linked types of knowledge in terms of how would you phrase certain words if you were trying to describe what to do to get somebody to the different levels of learning. How are we linked? How is types of knowledge linked to Bloom's taxonomy? So if we're talking about factual knowledge, and we're just talking about remembering, you might tell somebody to list the information. If we're talking about getting to an understanding for factual knowledge, you might have them summarize it. Let's go down to procedural knowledge, the hands-on learning. For remembering, you might have them tabulate. To apply, you might have them calculate, right? A formula. Let's look at conceptual knowledge. The pinnacle of this course is linking content. So to get them to remember it, we would have them describe it. To get to an understanding, interpret that. To create something, we would have them develop a plan and how everything is interconnected. It's the reason you see me drawing these out to help capture those visual learners, but I want you to see the big picture items and how they're interconnected. Right? Bloom's taxonomy, cognitive domain. How is that connected to information processing? Well, you're going to see, eventually you'll see this drawing again when we get to information processing. How is types of knowledge, what we've got listed here, connected to Bloom's taxonomy? Again, conceptual learning, linking those two concepts in something that's visual. So that is Bloom's taxonomy and the connection to types of knowledge. There's our references. And this is the organization here that created this matrices of the connection of types of knowledge to Bloom's taxonomy. So if you want more information, go to their website.